A warm welcome. You're watching RT International with me, Nikki Aaron, bringing you continuing live coverage of our breaking news. The Syrian capital Damascus has been hit by missiles fired in a US-led operation against the Assad government. The Pentagon said it also targeted 2 locations near the city of Homs. President Trump announced the military action in a Friday evening TV address. It comes in response to an alleged chemical attack in the Syrian town of Douma a week ago. RT's Caleb Morgan reports.
Well, we heard an announcement from U.S. President Donald Trump about the pending strike against the Syrian government in coordination with the U.K. and France. Now, he used the phrase strong deterrent to describe his motivation, said he wanted to deter the Syrian government from carrying out future chemical attacks. He called out Iran and Russia, saying what kind of nation would want to be aligned with a mass murderer. And from there, he used some rather inflammatory language. It's kind of almost trademark language of U.S. President Donald Trump.
Very terrible regime. These are not the actions of a man. They are crimes of a monster instead. So today, the nations of Britain, France, and the United States of America have marshaled their righteous power against barbarism and brutality.
Now, after that, we got a military update. We heard from General Joseph Dunford as well as U.S. Secretary of Defense James Mattis. They spoke to the U.S. media and to the world, basically giving the lowdown on what had happened. Now, at that point, the striking had already stopped. They said it was 50 minutes of sustained airstrikes against the Syrian government. Furthermore, it's important to note that when James Mattis was speaking, not only after the attacks, but also earlier in the week, he wasn't willing to go into detail about the attack and was rather vague about the kind of information that he actually had.
I am confident the Syrian regime conducted a chemical attack on innocent people. Yeah, we're very confident that chlorine was used. We are not ruling out sarin right now. We have the intelligence level of confidence that we needed to conduct the attack. I believe there was a chemical attack, and we're looking for the actual evidence. The OPCW, this is the Organization for the Chemical Weapons Convention. We're trying to get those inspectors in. If we get them in, we will not know who did it. They can only say that they found evidence or did not.
Broader in the international community, there is simply not consensus about what actually happened in the Syrian town of Douma. We've seen UN Security Council meetings, and we've seen a big disagreement between countries. Russia's representative has come forward before the UN Security Council and said that they have sent Russian experts and Russia chemical experts to Douma, and in Douma they have not found any traces of chemicals. They have not found any victims who have come forward and said that they witnessed or that they themselves were victims of chemical attacks. No one in hospitals being treated. And we then heard Nikki Haley, the representative of the United States before the UN Security Council. We heard her coming out and saying, in the aftermath of this allegation of an attack, without any investigation having been done, saying what she believed had taken place.
Did a chemical weapons attack happen? Yes. The U.S. has analyzed, yes, it has happened. The UK has analyzed, yes, it has happened. France has analyzed, yes, it has happened. 3 separate analyses, all coming back with the same thing. There is proof that this happened.
So we're still waiting for a broader reaction to this airstrike. People are waiting to see what will happen next. I know people were anticipating this strike because of Donald Trump's tweets telling Russia to get ready for the missiles, insulting the Syrian president with certain language. As of now, we understood that there was 50 minutes of airstrikes against the Syrian Arab Republic by the United States. We're waiting to see what the next move is and what will happen next in the international community.
Well, Trump may seem to have rushed in, but it wasn't always like that. Back in 2013, he was highly critical of then-President Barack Obama's approach on Syria, saying bad things will happen if Washington launches an attack. Well, after becoming president, Trump dropped Tomahawk missiles on Syria, but there could be a possible explanation for the sea change.
Rally around the flag effect and increased popular support of the president during war, accompanied by reduced criticism of governmental policies.
Any nuclear missile launched from Cuba against any nation in the Western Hemisphere as an attack by the Soviet Union on the United States.
Progress is now being made towards the restoration of peace in the Caribbean.
We refuse to permit the use of terrorism and the seizure and the holding of hostages to impose political demands.
We will seek to continue, along with other nations and with the officials of Iran, a prompt resolution of the crisis.
I have therefore directed to eject the Iraqi army from Kuwait. As president, I can report to the nation, aggression is defeated, the war is over.
American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger. The United States and our allies have prevailed.
Tonight I ordered a targeted military strike on the airfield in Syria.
I think Donald Trump became President of the United States. I think this was actually a big moment.
We can now show you some of the latest pictures from the Syrian capital, Damascus, where people there have taken to the streets to denounce the US-led military action. As you can see, many people there are waving flags in support for the Syrian government. Earlier we spoke to local journalist Zayed Haidar, who's in Damascus, and he described the feelings in the city there.
The aggression started at 4 a.m. Syria timing. It lasted about 50 minutes, but we kept hearing the launching of anti-missile and anti-aircraft near the research center that was hit in Barza residential area. We kept hearing until 5:15 the launching of anti-missile rockets. But the atmosphere is quite normal. Life is again normal. This has been going on for 7 years. In a way, people are used to the atmosphere of war. It is sarcastic that the Americans, the French and the British didn't really need the proof, or didn't need to wait to see if this attack did actually happen, wait for evidence, wait for, for the usual procedures to happen.
We can now cross live to Sultan Mahmoud Hali, who is a veteran of the Pakistan Air Force, to discuss these latest developments further. Mr. Mahmoud, thank you for joining us on the programme. Let's talk about the timing of the strike, shall we? It's quite curious, the urgency of these strikes that come just hours before the OPCW investigators are due to arrive in Syria to investigate that alleged chemical attack. What do you make of it?
Exactly. You see, what is curious about this sad incident is the timing. President Trump knew that the OPCW is going to be, its officials are going to be landing in Syria today to investigate and unearth probably a lie that chemical weapons were used against innocent civilians. So before that, he has struck along with his two allies, the Brits and the French, and they have, you see, shaken the movement. Let me tell you that last week I was in Moscow to attend the Moscow Conference on International Security, and over there this particular occasion had been boycotted by USA and Europe because of the alleged poisoning of the Russian agent in Britain. But there were 850 participants who were showering accolades on Russia for having handled the Syrian situation very well, for having defeated the Islamic State or the ISIS, and America could not bear that. Therefore, it has decided to take this very gross action, which is actually contrary to the rules of the law, contrary to the rules of humanity, and needs condemnation worldwide.
This OPCW investigation is incredibly important. Due to start today, they will get to the bottom of whether chemical weapons were used in Syria or not. Why do you think... my question is, do you think that these strikes that come just hours before the investigation is due to start is going to hamper the investigation at all, is going to change their findings in any way?
Definitely, it is going to color the investigation. It's going to hamper the investigations because, you see, so far no concrete evidence had been presented. The French President Macron was saying that a red line has been crossed. Trump was saying that we have evidence, and Theresa May says that there is evidence. But their evidence was based upon media reports as well as from certain NGOs whose loyalties are probably with vested interest. This lie was going to be nailed by OPCW, but now with the attacks taking place, the investigations are definitely going to be hampered, because so far we have not seen any concrete evidence, as well as the people on the ground. I think there are Russian experts in Syria, as well as Syrian experts who have gone to the place, and they have come out that there were probably only 21 bodies which you see were killed because of subsidification, and that had no evidence of any chemical weapons having been used. Now, with this attack having taken place, in all probability, there is going to be a disturbance as well as disruption of the right flow of investigation.
Now, the claims of the alleged chemical attack in Duma were made by the White Helmets group, a controversial group, we could say. Russian experts were also in the area, and they found no evidence of a poison attack had taken place. Why do you think those details have been largely ignored?
You see, we are dealing with an American president who I am constrained to say is not steadfast, nor steady, nor is he a rational thinker. And unfortunately, he's supported by two allies, the Brits and the French, who are going along because Donald Trump has been also supporting them in their own domestic issues, like, for example, the alleged poisoning of the Russian agent. So these people, they are not basing their attacks or actions on either reason. I mean, it reminds me of the Shakespearean quote from Hamlet, that judgment thou art fled to brutish beasts, and men have lost their reason. This is exactly the case where they have lost their reason, and they need an excuse to make an attack, and they do not need any evidence, and that is the reason why concrete evidence is being ignored.
It's interesting how just 1 day ago, the US Defense Secretary James Mattis said that they were still looking for evidence, and now, 24 hours later, he's apparently very confident about the use of chemical weapons in Syria. What do you think changed in a day?
Well, you see, as I mentioned earlier, Donald Trump has got this old cowboy mentality of shooting first and asking questions later. What really changed was when they realized that their lie is going to be uncovered by the international organization that is either landed or is in the process of landing in Syria today. So they struck immediately to make sure that they come out as the winners. But unfortunately, you may tell a lie very often, but it has to be unearthed sooner or later.
The White House is saying that the decision to conduct the strike was made based on photos, videos, media sources, and reliable information. Quote. Do you think that's enough? Is that sufficient to bomb a country? Where's the intelligence? And what does this say about US intelligence if that's not the source that they're turning to?
U.S. intelligence, I'm sorry, has to be taken with a pinch of salt. Their own Secretary of State, Colin Powell, who had made a statement in the United Nations, as well as to his own Congress, about the presence of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And later on, it was found that they were just not there. So this speaks volumes for the level of intelligence, because unfortunately the US may be having intelligence to the contrary, but since it has made up its mind to carry out a certain attack, it is going to bend the intelligence, it's going to twist it, make it malleable and ductile to force its own viewpoint and support its actions, and that is where the fault lies. And that is why we need to rely on, organizations like the United Nations or, for example, the OPCW to come to the bare facts, rather than these people taking actions on their own. Now, you see, what is sad about it is that all these three heads of state, Donald Trump, Macron, and Theresa May, they did not even consult their own parliament. Their own people are unhappy about it, and their own opposition is unhappy about it. So that is why they are bending the intelligence to prove that they are right.
Yeah, and what kind of a backlash do you think these world leaders are going to get from their own people? I mean, the Democratic Party, including some from his own party, have criticised Trump for bypassing Congress on his decision to launch this strike. Also, Theresa May getting criticism. Still early hours of the morning there, so we're expecting more reaction. But the Scottish Nationalist Party, National Party leader, Nicola Sturgeon, says that she has, Theresa May has serious questions to answer over these strikes. Also, a criticism coming in from Corbyn as well. What do you think the British people, the American people, the French people are going to make of these decisions?
Well, you see, unless they can conjure a rabbit out of the hat, when I say that, I mean they can prove that an actual chemical strike took place, their own people are going to take them to task. End of the day, these are democratic nations, so-called democratic nations, who have been elected by the people. And if they ignore the wishes of the people, if they take unilateral action where human lives are lost, against or contrary to the wishes or the desires of the people, they are answerable. And the same people will take them to task and are going to charge them for having broken that trust which exists for the vote that was reposed in them. That is why now they are scurrying about trying to find evidence which unfortunately doesn't appear to be there.
Well, this evidence that the US claims led it to believe that their chemical weapons had been used, these media reports, these photos, other evidence they claim. What's the likelihood, this is the million-dollar question, what's the likelihood that we'll ever see this evidence, that it will ever be made public?
You see, if they can find evidence that chemical weapons were used, they're going to make it public. But since there is no evidence, apparently, I believe so. And I've seen some other reports from other sources. I've seen the Russian defense minister, for example, ministry releasing a video and of certain people who were doctors who were at the hospital where some of these alleged victims were brought in, and they found no evidence of chemical weapons having been used. So in that case, the Americans, the Brit and the French, the trio, are going to hide the facts because they have themselves nowhere to hide in the face of the starking truth.
Sultan Mahmood Hali, veteran of the Pakistan Air Force, thank you for joining us on RT International and sharing your thoughts with us. We appreciate it. Now, for those of you just joining us, we're giving you breaking news at this hour. The US has launched strikes alongside its European allies, the UK and France.
This evening, I have authorised British armed forces to conduct coordinated and targeted strikes to degrade the Syrian regime's chemical weapons capability and deter their use.
We acted in accordance with our responsibility. The use of chemical weapons in Syria is unacceptable because it's a violation of international law and basic human rights.
British and French fighter jets could be seen taking off and landing from their bases in the region. Initially, France stressed it would not allow an escalation, and Britain's Prime Minister gave a green light to the US-led strikes without a vote in Parliament. On Saturday morning, Britain's top diplomat praised and welcomed the operation. That's as former Foreign Secretary David Miliband denounced it, stating that bombs are not a substitute for diplomacy. He also pointed out that many people in Syria are in need of urgent humanitarian aid. Opposition party leader Jeremy Corbyn earlier went on record saying an intervention would only complicate the current situation in Syria.
Russia, America, the European Union, all the neighbouring countries, Iran, Saudi Arabia, have got to be involved in ensuring there is a real ceasefire and a political process that does give hope to the people of Syria in the future. More bombing, more killing, more war will not save life, will just take more lives and spawn the war elsewhere.
Do you think military strikes in Syria will help solve anything?
Hell no.
I don't know, it's just a whole mess at the moment.
Well, I'd be very anxious about any kind of military intervention. What would it actually achieve?
I really disagree with military action against anything happening in Syria. There's already enough fighting going on there as it is, and there's a real danger of war escalating way beyond what we expect.
If it's narrow and well targeted, could send an important signal. If it's pushed up, no, it's a bad signal.
Military intervention never helps anything. I think we have that empire attitude where these countries have these problems, have these civil wars, and we try and go in and fix it. But we had our civil war, when the Americans had their civil war, nobody went and bombed us, and we got this society we have now. They need to go through this on their own.
The bombing raids on Syria come before the international chemical watchdogs start their probe into the alleged attack in Douma last weekend. OPCW experts are due to arrive at the scene on Saturday, that's later today. We've requested a comment from the organisation and will bring you that as soon as we get it. Well, meanwhile, Washington says it's confident that the Syrian government used chemical weapons against its own people. According to a White House statement, their confidence in that is based not on intelligence, but on media and NGO reports.
This conclusion is based on descriptions of the attack in multiple media sources, the reported symptoms experienced by victims, videos, and images showing 2 assessed barrel bombs from the attack, and reliable information indicating coordination between Syrian military officials before the attack.
However, questions hang over the West's narrative due to the dubious reputations of the groups behind the allegations. Murad Gassiev explains.
Reports of a chemical attack first appeared, strangely enough, at almost the precise moment the battle had ended, when the Syrian government and rebels were negotiating on how to evacuate the latter. Reports first appeared on social media, Twitter, Facebook, and spread like wildfire.
Well, my colleague Ken Delanian and I have learned today that the U.S. now has blood and urine samples from some of the victims of this attack in Syria last weekend, and that those samples, according to U.S. officials, tested positive for chemicals.
Sources, the usuals, white helmets who serve as rescuers for Islamists and Syrian rebels. Also, the somewhat less known Syrian-American Medical Society, SAMS. Together with the white helmets, they were cited by the Washington Post, the New York Times, CNN, virtually every Western media outlet reporting on this chemical attack.
Saturday, April 7th, amidst continuous bombardment of residential neighborhoods in the city of Douma, more than 500 cases, the majority of whom are women and children, were brought to local medical centers with symptoms indicative of exposure to a chemical agent.
SAMS itself is funded by U.S. aid, $6 million in 2015. U.S. aid is widely believed to be an arm of the State Department and is banned in multiple countries, accused of interfering in domestic policies and promoting regime change. It even has an Office of Transition Initiatives. The management at SAMS are also, believe it or not, former USAID staffers. It was SAMS who reportedly provided the OPCW with samples of the alleged sarin gas that was used in Khan Sheikhoun, the site of a chemical attack last year, after which Donald Trump sent 57 cruise missiles at the Syrian airbase. OPCW is on its way to Douma to investigate. We've contacted various groups, including the World Health Organization. They've cited SAMS, but have refused to go into any details. What comes next, no one can say. Whether the US will go ahead with a preemptive strike or whether cooler heads will prevail.
Author and journalist Max Blumenthal believes people should be skeptical about the role of one group in particular in Syria.
Well, what's remarkable is that this group, the Syrian American Medical Society, is cited by a who's who of Western media organizations as a credible source when it's anything but. This organization, which is funded to the tune of close to $6 million or more by USAID, a wing of the State Department, which actually emerged out of the CIA to encourage regime change in what the U.S. considers enemy states. This organization is directed by an operative named Zahar Salul, who's actually a lobbyist who's been lobbying the U.S. government since the Obama administration for a war of regime change. And this organization operates hospitals exclusively in territory controlled by Al-Qaeda's Syrian affiliate and its allies. So this is to me, this should be a national scandal that U.S. taxpayers are basically paying for the civil society wing of Al-Qaeda and its Salafi jihadi allies. And we're simply talking in U.S. media about this organization as if they're just a bunch of Syrian field doctors. This is an international lobbying and influence organization dedicated to stimulating regime change. And so we absolutely have to be skeptical when they make these allegations of a chemical attack, because that advances their agenda, and they have every motive to deceive the West about it.
Well, just to recap our breaking news now, the US, France and the UK have bombed targets in Syria. President Trump announced the military action in a White House address late on Friday. As he spoke, explosions rocked Damascus. The air and missile strikes were launched in response to an alleged chemical attack in the Syrian town of Douma last Saturday. Washington says it's confident the Assad government used chemical weapons against civilians. However, in a statement, the White House admits the evidence they have is based on media and NGO reports. Russia's foreign ministry slammed the strikes, saying they came when the war-ravaged country finally had the chance for a peaceful future. The strikes also take place before investigators from the International Chemical Weapons Watchdog, the OPCW, start their probe into the alleged poison gas attack in Douma. So far, the experts are still expected at the scene later today. Well, thanks for joining us on RT International. We'll be continuing to bring you all the latest on our breaking news story in the coming hours. For now, we're going to take a 30-minute break, but we are on standby for a briefing from the Russian Defense Ministry, and we'll be going live to that as soon as it starts. So do stay with us if you can.